pleasure to welcome you all. And the DOST-FNRI, being the principal arm or the premier arm of the government in food and nutrition researches, as well as science and technology services, continuously develops nutrition tools as guides and standards to be used by our stakeholders like you. Using these guides and standards will direct our activities and interventions towards the needs of our patients or the population as a whole to improve the nutritional status as well as the quality of life of Filipinos. Now, as registered nutritionist dietitians, it is very important to equip ourselves with knowledge on the latest food and nutrition tools, especially now that we are to implement the intensive nutritional assessment and diagnosis in order for us to dispense necessary interventions like counseling or any other dietary supplementation and try to monitor and evaluate its progress. For this webinar series, we will learn about the uses of different nutrition tools such as the Philippine Dietary Reference Intake, the Pinggang Pinoy, the Nutritional Guidelines for Filipinos, and the new Food Exchange List and Food Composition Table. Now, as you can see, our Philippine Dietary Reference Intake has used different terms already. So you have the EAR, the EAR, so when do you use your macronutrient distribution rates, etc. No? So please try to concentrate on all the lectures because these are important knowledge that you will gain from this webinar in order for you to have directions in actually putting forward what kind of education are you going to give to your patients or to the population as a whole. Now, we at FNRI, as the developer of these nutrition tools, we feel motivated, of course, no, and inspired when these tools are being used by our fellow registered nutritionist dietitians and other health-allied professionals. Now, rest assured that we will continue to strive to develop more useful nutrition tools that are easy to implement and easy to understand, no? And are practical in our daily undertaking or conduct of our profession. We hope that we will be able to complete the 4 webinar sessions, as this will earn you, of course, 3 CPD units granted by our PRC CPD team, no? So we would like to thank you for your time in attending this webinar. The DOST will continue to actually put more efforts, and conduct more webinars that can help upgrade our knowledge even in these uncertain times. We know very well that this is the only platform that we can reach you. And sabi nga ni Celine, if there is a positive thing that we can earn or can gain from this pandemic, is actually to reach out a wider coverage of population for knowledge diffusion. So for this, I wish you all a fruitful and knowledge-filled morning. So patuloy po tayo manalangin at patuloy po tayong mag-ingat para po tayo ay ma-prevent sa sinasabi nating pandemic ng coronavirus. Maraming salamat po and God bless. Over to you, Celine.
Thank you very much po, Dr. Agrepa. So let's all give a virtual clap po to our director. And
thank you, Doc Mel.
Thank you, Dr. Milflor.
Thank you.
And that's Dr. Mil. Actually, sabi ang sutil ko sa kanya ay itong division na hindi natutulog. Sige po.
Doc Mel, can we ask for a photo opportunity po with you?
Ay, sige po.
Can we ask our participants to our resource speaker to please open for your cameras so we will be able to take a screenshot po. We will appreciate po to see you. Yan. Madami na pong naglagay sa ating chat box. Meron po from Catanduanes, from Pangasinan, from San Pedro. Yan, maraming salamat po. From Cainta Rizal, from Dinanggalang Aurora. Yan. So all over the
Sean, we're now 140, Doc Mel.
Oo nga, nakikita ko.
Opo.
Salamat naman. At least, because these are really important to know, no? So,
Yes po. And we're live streaming po sa YouTube, Doc Mel. Thank
yes
you.
po. I think we know very well that there's a need for us also to update some. And we are actually in the process of consultation with our stakeholders to update siguro our PDRI, no? But since this is still the latest, then we still can use. Salamat.
Opo, Doc Mel, okay. So we can take a picture po. So Miss Colleen po will assist us in the photo. Okay po, so I will count po, okay. For the first panel po, okay. 1, 2, 3, smile po. Okay, for the second panel, okay.
Saan daw level?
Yes.
Doc Mela.
1, 2, 3, smile po. Okay. Our third panel po.
Naku, nakikita ko sa frame sina Angie. Angela, kumusta na?
Yes po, si Ma'am po. Ano po? Okay, fourth panel po, Miss Colleen. Fifth and sixth. Okay, so there you have it. Thank you very much po. We're happy to see you all po. Yan, si Ma'am Pablo. Hi, Ma'am Pablo.
Hello po sa inyong lahat.
Yes po. Thank you po
for
joining.
na lang po yung pagkikita natin.
Opo. And we thank you po for joining us, especially during na madaming webinars kami yung napili.
Angie, I miss you talaga. Angela. Uy, ang ganda na Angela. Oh. Sige po, bye-bye.
Thank you po, Doc Mel.
Thank you po sa inyong lahat. Take care.
Thank you, Doc Mel.
So, as Dr. Agnepa said, the DOST-FNRI is the principal research agency of the government when it comes to food and nutrition researches. And we regularly develop and update nutrition tools that are being used by most of R&Ds in our country. It is in our task to ensure that these tools are useful to us. Thus, to start a discussion on nutrition tools, particularly on the Philippine dietary reference intake, let me introduce our speaker for today. So let me share my screen to introduce our speaker. Sorry. Okay. So our speaker for today is a registered chemist. He obtained her Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from UP Diliman and currently taking up his MS Chemistry also from UP Diliman. He is currently involved in nutrition researches like nutrition profiling and nutrition labeling. Let's all welcome, let's all give a virtual clap to our speaker, Mr. Carl Vincent B. Cabanilla, Senior Science Research Specialist from DOST-FNRI. Good morning, Sir Carl. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Celine. Thank you. Good morning, Doc Mel and Doc Neil, and to all our how many viewers? 145 Zoom attendees, as well as our viewers from YouTube. Let me share my screen. Okay, before anything else, I would like to thank the TDSTSD, the Technology Diffusion, and SNT Services Division for inviting me to be part of this very important and relevant webinar series on DOST-FNRI Developed Nutrition Tools. This is Carl Cabanilla, and I am pleased to present the first of the series, Philippine Dietary Reference Intakes, or PDRI, the Science and Application. I would like to begin my presentation with a disclosure of interests. I have no financial or non-financial relationships to declare that may be in conflict with my presentation. In the next 30 minutes or so, I will be talking about the background, development process, key concepts, and uses of PDRI. This has been mentioned several times in other fora, but I would like to reiterate the mission, vision, and mandates of DOST-FNRI because this forms as a basis for the development of nutrition tools and standards. FNRI is guided by its mission to fight malnutrition with accurate data, correct information, and innovative technologies. FNRI envisions optimum nutrition for all Filipinos, socially, sorry for that, socially and economically empowered through scientifically sound, environment-friendly, and globally competitive technologies. FNRI has three mandates. Number one, to undertake researches that define the citizenry's nutritional status with reference to the malnutrition problem, its causes and effects. Number two, to develop and recommend policy options, strategies, programs, and projects for implementation by appropriate agencies. And third, to diffuse knowledge and technologies in food and nutrition and provide S&T services to relevant stakeholders. By virtue of its second mandate, DOST-FNRI is the go-to organization when it comes to nutrition and food guidance in the country. It is the primary government agency responsible for the development of all the tools and standards you see here in this slide. Of course, with the vital support of food and nutrition experts and other government agencies. Today, we will be focusing on one of them, the PDRI. I'm sure most of you have heard about PDRI. It is the new nutrient standard for Filipinos, updating and expanding the 2002 RENI or Recommended Energy and Nutrient Intakes. But what really is PDRI? So some definitions. PDRI is a comprehensive set of energy and nutrient reference values for the healthy Filipino population. It is used in assessing, planning, and promoting food and nutrient intakes of the population. And it serves as a basis of food and nutrition policies and interventions. PDRI is the umbrella term comprising the four reference values for energy and nutrient intakes, the EAR, the REI or RNI, the AI, and the UL. I will discuss each of these in the succeeding slides. By the way, the PDRI is primarily based on the US-Canadian Dietary Reference Intakes, or DRIs, and the FAO-WHO recommended nutrient intakes, or RNIs. The first PDRI value is the EAR. EAR is referred to as the average daily nutrient level that meets the requirements of half the healthy individuals in the particular life stage and sex group. As shown in this graph, the EAR is the intake at which the risk of inadequacy is 50%. The EAR is the best estimate of the requirement because it is the median value and is directly based from primary research data. Examples of nutrients that have EAR are vitamin A, the B vitamins, vitamin C, iron, zinc, selenium, iodine, calcium, and phosphorus. The second PDRI value is the RNI. It is defined as or recommended nutrient intake. It is defined as the level of intake of nutrient that meets the requirements of almost all of the healthy individuals in a particular life stage and sex group. The RNI is obtained by adding twice the SD or standard deviation of the requirement to the EAR. If there's no SD or standard deviation, an assumed coefficient of variation is used. The process of adding 2SD or 2CV is not applicable to energy. Examples of nutrients that have RNIs are, of course, those nutrients that have EAR. So we have vitamin A, the B vitamins, vitamin C, iron, zinc, selenium, iodine, calcium, and phosphorus. The third PDRI value is the AI, or adequate intake. It is defined as the daily nutrient intake level based on observed or experimentally determined approximations of the average nutrient intake by a group of apparently healthy people that is assumed to be adequate. When there is no sufficient data to establish the EAR and thus the RNI, the AI can be used. But as compared to the RNI, excuse me, the AI has less certainty. It has no relationship with the EAR or RNI because it was set without the estimate of the requirement. As shown in this graph, the AI is thought to be found here between the RNI and the UL, or somewhere above the RNI. Examples of nutrients that have adequate intakes are vitamin D, vitamin E, and fluoride. The fourth PDRI value is the tolerable upper intake level, or upper limit, or UL. The proliferation and aggressive marketing of nutritional supplements makes it necessary to provide guidance to health professionals and consumers on upper safe levels of vitamins and minerals. The UL is the highest average daily nutrient intake level, likely to pose no adverse health effects to almost all individuals in the general population. This is the intake at which the risk of inadequacy is zero, and the risk of excess also is close to zero. As intake increases above the UL, the potential risk of adverse effects also increases. Examples of nutrients that have upper limits are vitamin A, D, E, B1, B6, folate, C, iron, zinc, selenium, iodine, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, and fluoride. Apart from the four reference values, the macronutrients also have what we call the AMDR, or acceptable macronutrient distribution range. It is a range of intakes for a particular energy source, carbohydrates, protein, or fat that is associated with reduced risk of chronic diseases while providing adequate intakes of essential nutrients. It is expressed as a percentage of total energy intake. Out of the 28 nutrients in RENI 2002, 27 were retained, removing manganese. We added PUFA, or polyunsaturated fatty acids, the alpha-linolenic acid, or N3, and linoleic acid, or the N6 fatty acid. So this is the recommended energy intakes based on the PDRI 2015. So those values in red are values that are higher compared to RENI 2002, while those values in blue are values that are lower than in RENI 2002. So basically, mas mataas yung children in general, yung energy values because of the higher reference weights, whereas yung adults naman ay higher recommended energy intakes because of the higher reference weights. So this slide shows the AMDR, or the acceptable macronutrient distribution ranges for protein, total fat, and carbohydrates. As you can see, mataas yung range natin ng carbohydrates because we are a rice-eating population as compared to the Caucasians. Mas mataas, sa Caucasians, mas mataas yung percentage na ng protein and fat compared to the Filipinos. So I'm going to show you examples of recommended nutrient intakes from the PDRI. So ang kinuha kong example would be the protein. As you can see here, the recommended protein intakes for children are lower in 2015 compared to RENI 2002, while the recommended protein intakes for adults are higher compared to 2002 because no upward adjustments for the protein energy ratio were done, unlike in the 2002 RENI, since the actual protein energy values for the EAR and RNI are within the protein energy reference values in the 2007 FAO report. So the RNI for protein for children are lower than the 2002 recommendations because of the lower rates also of protein deposition adopted from the 2007 FAO report. For adults, the AAR and RNI estimates are relatively higher than the 2002 values due to increased reference weights and application of a higher coefficient of variation. For vitamin A, the 2015 values are greater than the 2002 RENI for Filipino adults and teenagers because of the lower value adopted for storage efficiency of ingested vitamin A, which is 40%. Note that the pregnant and lactating women don't have the same RNI for vitamin A. This is one of the questions in your pretest. So alam niyo na yung sagot sa post-test. Okay, I'm also going to show you the RNIs for calcium because it is also one of the questions in your pretest. I'd just like to point out the adult male. Well, the values are the same compared to the RENI 2002. So na-retain sila. And I'd just like to point out yung adult male and female age 50 to 59. So this is the menopausal age. The values for both sexes do not have the same RNI for calcium. Because for female older adults, 50 to 59 years old, extra allowance is given for the obligatory losses for urine. Please note also that the calcium recommendation for pregnant women is for the 3rd trimester only. For iron naman, those values that are in parentheses means that the requirement cannot be met by usual diet alone. The intake of iron-rich and iron-fortified foods and the use of supplements are recommended if necessary. So these are the estimated average requirements or EARs for the different vitamins and minerals. And also the tolerable upper intake levels or upper limits for the different nutrients. So we don't have this values in RENI 2002, but in Pdri 2015, we already have this. The PDRI also recommends limiting intake of free sugars to less than 10% of the total energy in children and adults. This means that for a 2,000 calorie diet, we should limit our sugar intake to 10 teaspoons per day. The PDRI also recommends limiting intake to less than 2 grams of sodium in adults, which is equivalent to 1 teaspoon of table salt per day. This is based on the WHO recommendation on free sugar intake. What do we mean by free sugars? Free sugars are all monosaccharides and disaccharides added to foods and drinks by the manufacturer, cook, or consumer, including sugars naturally present in honey, syrups, fruit juices, and fruit concentrates. For both sodium and potassium, the recommendation for children is extrapolated from adults based on energy requirement. Okay, these are the salient differences between the RENI 2002 and the PDRI 2015. Number one is the shift of obviously from a single value to multiple reference values. Number two is the adjustment of the reference weights for infants and children based on the WHO Child Growth Standards or CGS and growth reference, and those for adults based on the weight to achieve BMI of 22 using the 2013 NNS height data. Third major difference is the revision of age groupings for children to reflect the established biological patterns and international feeding guidelines. So from 1 to 3 years old in RENI 2002, we revised it into 1 to 2 years old in Pdri 2015. Fourth key difference is in terms of the nutrients covered. So we include additional nutrients like polyunsaturated fatty acids and removed manganese, as mentioned earlier. Another key difference is the inclusion of the AMDR, or the acceptable macronutrient distribution ranges, for protein total fat and carbohydrates for the reduction of chronic disease. And another key difference is the recommendation on maximum intake levels of sodium and free sugars for the reduction of risk of cardiovascular disease, obesity, and dental caries. And the last major difference is the clarification on the appropriate DRI values for different uses and applications. So for each reference value has its own use and application. So how did PDRI come about? The Philippine Recommended Dietary Allowances, or RDA, was the country's first nutrient-based dietary standard. It was formulated by the National Research Council of the Philippines in 1941. The first RDA revision was undertaken the Philippine Association of Nutrition in 1947. 6 years later, the task of reviewing and revising the standards was taken over by the Institute of Nutrition, which is the forerunner of the FNRI. By 1989, there were 5 revisions and expansions of the Philippine RDA that were issued by the FNRI. The 2002 edition was called the Recommended Energy and Nutrient Intakes, to emphasize that the standards were in terms of energy and nutrients and not foods or diets. Dietary standards are constantly changing. They evolve as new concepts of health and nutritional adequacy are introduced, or as new evidence on nutrient requirements accumulates, and as new roles of nutrients become known. Dietary standards are thus periodically reviewed and revised when necessary. Because of its important impact on nutrition policy, nutrient standards must be based on the best available and most up-to-date science. As in the previous revisions of the RENI, a systematic process for setting the next recommendations was followed. The Pdri Committee was formed, composed of experts in health and nutrition, biochemistry, and relevant fields. A technical working group was created, which consisted of science research specialists of FNRI, with each member responsible for reviewing available data and new information on energy or a specific nutrient or group of nutrients. The task forces, or TF for energy and specific nutrients, reviewed and drafted the recommendations for energy and specific nutrients. The TWG presented the proposed recommendations to the Pdri Committee and Bank for deliberation. The proposed draft recommendations were reviewed by an external panel and presented after review and revision, was presented in a stakeholders meeting with a group of stakeholders, including users of RENI or PDRI from various fields such as nutritionists and dietitians, clinicians, academicians, and professionals from the agriculture, food industry, and regulatory sectors. The review process started in 2010 and was completed in 2015. The Pdri Committee was composed of reputable experts in public health, nutrition and dietetics, biochemistry, medicine, and relevant fields, some of whom are leaders in their respective fields or disciplines. Ayan. The different task forces for energy and specific nutrients are composed of 1 to 2 PDRI committee members and at least 1 TWG member. They reviewed the literature and available evidence and drafted the recommendations for energy and specific nutrients. The external panel is a second group of experts who are independent from the PDRI committee and reviewed the draft recommendations prepared by the TWG. So after discussing the background and key concepts of PDRI, how do we use it? The PDRI has huge influence on national nutrition policies, including those related to planning and assessing diets for Filipinos, including the development of food-based dietary guidelines, formulating standards and regulations on food fortification, nutrition labeling and claims, designing and evaluating food and nutrition assistance programs, determining food bundles which serve as the basis for estimating food poverty thresholds, and ultimately the incidence of poverty, setting agricultural targets, and establishing minimum wage. The two main uses of the PDRI are to assess and to plan dietary reference intakes. Specific guidance on how to use and interpret the four components of the PDRI when assessing and planning the dietary intakes of both individuals and groups may take another session. However, this figure or diagram shown on the screen may suffice for now. When assessing diets of individuals and groups, the DRI recommended for use is the EAR. A common application of EAR in dietary assessment is in determining the prevalence of inadequacy in a group, which is the proportion of the group with usual intakes below the EAR, just like in the National Nutrition Survey. The RNI is not the useful standard to assess an individual or group's intake because by definition, the RNI exceeds the requirement of almost all of the population, and a number of those whose intakes are below the RNI may be meeting their individual requirements. Planning diets, on the other hand, involves the setting of intake targets for individuals and determining the desirable intake distribution and nutrient gaps to fill for groups or population. The goal for dietary planning for the individual is to achieve a low probability of inadequate intake and not exceed the UL. Using the RNI to set the target nutrient intake while making sure that total nutrient intake from all from food, water, and supplements does not exceed the UL accomplishes this. In addition, it is desirable that the individual's intake of the macronutrients is within the AMDRs. Examples of applications for planning diets for individuals include individual level diet counseling and developing food-based dietary guidelines, which aim to assist individuals in making food choices. In summary, PDRI is a comprehensive set of energy and nutrient reference values for the healthy Filipino population. PDRI consists of four reference values: EAR, RNI or REI, AI, and UL, each of which has specific use and application. Notable differences between PDRI 2015 and RENI 2002 include the terminology, the age grouping, the reference weights, the reference values, and the intended uses and applications. I think this is my second to the last slide. The PDRI 2015 handbook is available at the library. You can, well, we are having a pandemic right now, so you can go to the library at the moment, but you can download the PDRI 2015 tables from the FNRI website. Unfortunately, the paperback copies are currently out of stock, so we're going to inform you when they are going to be available. I think I need to mention also that the PDRI 2015, we are proud to say that the book has won the 2019 and Outstanding Book Award by the National Academy of Science and Technology. I think that's my last slide. To know more about the DOST-FNRI programs and projects, you may get in touch with our director, Dr. Imelda Angeles Agdepa, using the contact details shown on the screen. For announcement and information about DOST-FNRI activities, you may also want to visit our social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. With that, I am grateful for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sir Carl, for your presentation. So let's all give a virtual clap to Sir Carl for his presentation. So we encourage everyone po to ask questions po, no? So this is our opportunity to ask questions kasi alam ko po madaming mga ND sa atin dito na nalilito po on the four intake levels po of PDRI. Sir, we have a question here, and I guess this is the common question we get every time we conduct a PDRI session. Okay, most of the nutrition facts of food products in the market are still based on RENI 2002. Are food manufacturers mandated to update it based on PDRI 2015?
Sorry, what was the question?
Are food manufacturers mandated to update it based on PDRI 2015?
Okay.
Labels, the nutrition facts.
Yeah, I got the chance to talk to FDA representatives, and I also attended a workshop, a CN workshop on NRVs, wherein FDA was one of the participants, and they told me that still they are using the RENI 2002. So they are in the process of drafting the circular on the adoption of PDRI 2015 as the labeling value to be used by food and beverage manufacturers. So to answer yung question po nung participant, I think the RENI 2002 is still the value to use for the nutrition labeling as mandated by the Philippine FDA. And I believe FDA is represented here. May nakita kong participant, maybe he or she could also add to what I said.
Yes po. So we have a FDA participant po dito. So maybe we later can ask. Okay,
pero sa pagkakalam ko, RENI 2002 pa din ang ginagawa.
Yes po. Okay, so sabi din po ng mga industry persons po na participant natin, so labeling regulations still states that we must follow RENI 2002. Okay, so we have another question, Sir Carl. When assessing and recommending nutrient intake for vitamins and minerals, can we consider the RNI as the lowest level of intake to meet the nutrient requirement and the UL as the maximum level of intake? When assessing and recommending nutrient intake, should they use RNI as lowest level of intake to meet the nutrient requirement?
Well, actually, safe kasi siya nasa safe range yung between RNI and UL. But when you say you're going to use it to assess, still we're going to follow yung guidelines natin on the application of PDRI. We're going to use EAR kasi it is the pinaka best estimate of the requirement. So EAR pa din, whether it is for group or for group or population or individual level, EAR ang ginagamit
Okay, so
in assessing intake.
okay, so I hope we answer your question po, Ms. Akia. Next po, we have another question here. In terms of product development, if for example, powdered milk beverage, and we are targeting the adult market of 19 to 29 years old, what reference do we use? It is RNI or EAR?
So, sorry, could you please repeat the question? 19 to 29 years old.
Yes, powdered milk, in developing a product for a powdered milk beverage.
Okay.
What reference do we use? RNI or EAR?
Okay. Product dev na to, no? Fortification. Well, our guideline says when you are planning a diet for a group or population, you're going to use the EAR. So, yun yung nire-recommend namin na gamitin nyo, yung EAR. Pero if the product is intended for an individual, you use the RNI. Usually, ginagamit ang RNI. Actually, very limited lang talaga ang RNI sa totoo lang. Ano lang siya, sa lahat ng, di ba, there are two general applications ng Pdri, dietary assessment, dietary planning. And then you have to determine kung para saan ito. Is it intended for an individual or for a group or population? So, pag nasagot mo yung tanong na yun, malalaman mo kung anong DRI value ang gagamitin mo. Doon sa apat na yun, pinakita ko, doon sa diagram, 3 instances na gagamitin mo yung EAR. Yung RNI, gagamitin mo lang siya for planning for individual. Yun lang yung time na gagamitin mo siya. The rest for EAR na siya. Because the reason is mainly dahil ang EAR is our best estimate of the requirement. The RNI kasi is may plus 2 SD, so may allowance na siya to cover yung requirements of all the population.
Okay, so Sir Carl, if FDA will revise their guidelines on nutrition facts labeling, so will they recommend the use of EAR or RNI?
Actually, I cannot answer right away kasi yan din ay malaking debate even in the United States. No? Kasi nung nilabas ng IOM ang kanilang guiding principles on nutrition labeling, yung IOM, yung Institute of Medicine, now the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, nirecommend nila yan na gamitin yung EAR. Pero maraming kumontra kasi sobrang liit daw ng EAR. So they're still using yung RDA as basis for the daily values or DV. Kasi ang tawag nila sa US kasi ng kanilang labeling values ay DV or daily values. At ang DV nila ay based on the highest RDA. So para covered lahat ng population. So it's still highly debatable.
Okay.
Hindi siya natapos na debate among nutrition scientists and experts.
Okay, so thank you, Sir Carl. So another question, what is the basis of the sodium level in PDRI 2015?
What is the basis for?
Less than 2 grams. Sodium ba?
Yeah, that was adopted from the WHO guideline on sodium intake for children and adults. I think the rationale for that is this is the level of intake that would prevent yung increased blood pressure. Kasi 'di ba sodium is associated with cardiovascular diseases. So pag lumagpas ka doon sa 2 grams of sodium, mag-increase yung risk mo for increased blood pressure.
Okay. So another question, Sir Carl. So for example, I am doing a 24-hour food recall for my patient. Should I use EAR for the computation of the adequacy of the meals of my patient and not RNI?
Yes, yes, Celine. EAR ang gagamitin mo na pang-assess, whether it is for, yun nga, individual, kasi parang pasyente po siya, di ba? So whether it is for an individual or for a group of population, EAR is the appropriate DRI value to use. In the past, wala tayong EAR eh. Nung RENI 2002 pa lang, RENI lang ang meron tayo. We estimate EAR as 80% of the REN of RNI. Kaya nung sa mga NNS natin noon, 'di ba, pag tinitingnan yung adequacy, yung prevalence ng inadequate intakes, 80% of the RENI ang nakalagay. Kasi yung 80% of the RENI is approximately equal to the EAR. But now that we have the EAR, we use the EAR.
What are the possible reasons daw po? While in RENI 2002, wala po tayong EAR, but in PDRI, we have EAR na po in 2015 po.
Well, during that time, hindi pa kasi masyadong na-promote or well-known yung DRI system ng US. Kasi mga 90s, mga mid-90s na-introduce yung DRI kasi ng US eh. And then yung WHO din, nag-publish sila ng kanilang reports on nutrient requirements mga 2004, ganyan din. Mas nauna pa yung RENI 2002. Yung energy nila 2002. So almost the same time as the RENI natin. So at that time na dinedevelop yung RENI 2002, hindi pa masyadong should I say kilala or hindi pa masyadong mainstream yung DRI. But now that marami nang nakakaalam about DRI, marami ng nutrition experts recognize the importance of having multiple reference values, in using in different applications. Kaya ginagamit na siya yung DRI. Actually sa ibang countries nag-multiple or multi-level recommendations na rin sila. Although ang tawag kasi nila, nag-iba-iba kasi yung terminologies eh. Sa Europe, I think it's population PRI, population reference intake. In other countries, RDA pa din. Pero may EAR, ganyan. So iba-ibang terminologies sa iba't ibang countries. Pero isa lang yung concept, no, na the median requirement is yung EAR and yung recommended intake or recommended allowance. Ibig sabihin meron kang margin of error na dinagdag. Yun yung RENI or RDA naman sa ibang countries. So they are conceptually equivalent, although iba lang yung terminologies.
Okay, so thank you po, Sir Carl. So we have a last question here po, Sir Carl. So manganese was mentioned to be removed in the PDRI. What is the rationale behind? In case we need reference values for this nutrient, may we still use the RENI values?
Sorry, I didn't get the question. Ano yung before yung...
Yeah, manganese was mentioned to be removed in PDRI. What is the rationale behind removing this nutrient sa PDRI?
Manganese? Yes. Sorry, I wasn't able to catch yung word. Manganese. Kasi yung manganese intake was based on the mean intake ng Americans. Mean manganese intake ng American population. So, the Pdri Committee decided na hindi siya appropriate na maging basis natin ng reference value sa Pilipinas kasi based siya sa survey data ng US. So, tinanggal siya.
So, in that case daw po, Sir Carl, if they need reference value for this nutrient, which is yung manganese, may we still use po the RENI values po?
Yes. Kasi AI, yung sa Reni naman is AI pa rin siya eh. 'Di ba as I explained kanina, if you don't have EAR or RNI, you can use AI. Pero be mindful lang doon sa limitations noong kasi mas malaki kasi uncertainty ng AI dahil hindi siya based sa primary research data, based lang siya sa observations, yun nga, example nun yung survey data. Ano yung average intake of the population? So hindi siya dahil ito yung requirement talaga nung katawan. Alam mo yun? Binase lang siya sa current intake of the population. So para lang meron kang surrogate value, kaya nag-set sila ng AI or adequate intake. I'd just like to point out, a very common example ng AI would be the reference value for infants, 0 to 6 months. Kasi, well, as you know, yung age kasi na to, mga batang to, they are very vulnerable, So hindi ethically mahirap silang pag-aralan. Hindi ka naman pwede mag-dose response study sa mga ganong edad. So hindi yun ma-approve sa ethics. That's why ang basis natin ng recommendation for infants would be yung amount ng nutrient from the breast milk. So yun na yung automatic na nutrient requirement niya. So you multiply yung level of nutrient sa breast milk from the mother times the volume of the milk or yung amount na breast milk intake ng bata. That would be the adequate intake for infants 0 to 6 months. In lieu of EAR or RNI for that age group. Kasi walang masyadong primary research data on nutrient intake for that age group.
Siguro, Sir Carl, last question na lang kasi medyo important yung question nitong nakalagay na isa sa chat box. So, if EAR po yung gagamitin basis specifically in assessing nutrient intake, is there like a range we can consider? Because it's possible po kasi na di exactly ma-meet yung exact EAR. So, I think this is referring po dun sa percent of adequacy, like anong percent yung masasabi na na-meet yung requirement po nung when assessing po nutrition intake.
Hindi ma-meet yung EAR. EAR is the pinakamababa, di ba? Mas mababa na nga siya sa RNI. So kung hindi siya ma-meet ng EAR, it means mababa talaga yung intake niya. So I don't think kahit i-range mo siya, that would solve your problem. Kasi yung safe level of intake natin, 'di ba, is between yung UL and pababa sa RNI. So I don't think range ba na pababa pa sa lower than EAR? I don't think
For example,
masyado na siyang mababa.
Sige po. So
Kung hindi na siya na-meet ng EAR, hindi talaga. hindi range ang recommended na gagamitin mo. Kaya siya EAR cut point method, 'di ba? Kasi titignan mo yung prevalence ng or proportion ng population na may intake below the EAR. This is the common misapplication ng EAR or RNI na nakikita ko. May mga thesis akong nakikita ang ginagawa nila, kinukuha nila yung average intake of the population and then kino-compare nila sa standard value or for example, EAR or RNI. That's not the proper way of evaluating yung prevalence ng inadequate intake. You get the proportion of the population that have the intake below the EAR or the RNI. Pero assessing to, no? So EAR, sabihin na natin EAR kasi hindi naman ginagamit ang RNI for assessing. So yun yung common mistake na nakikita natin sa mga papers, ganyan.
Okay po. So, malinaw po yun, sir. So, useful yun sa mga endes natin. So, yung inyo pong suggestion is we take po the number of people na below po dun sa EAR yung intake nila. For example, for vitamin C, kung below sila, dun sa EAR, consider na inadequate yung intake nila. Tama po ba, Sir Carl?
Yeah, yes, and you take the proportion of the population. So yun na yung prevalence mo ng inadequate intake. Not the average intake of the population and then you compare to the EAR. Hindi ganun.
Oo, usually ganun.
Usually ganun, di ba?
Okay. Okay. Thank you po, Sir Carl. Let's all give a virtual clap po to Sir Carl. Thank you po for being our resource speaker. I think all of our R&Ds present here will agree with me na madami po kaming natutunan kasi talaga pong nakakalito yung 4 na reference level po ng PDRI, and I'm sure it will all be useful to them po sa kanilang mga work po as nutritionist dietitian in public health and also in clinical nutrition. So thank you po, Sir Carl.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So before we end this webinar, okay, we thank you po for attending and using the iTrain website of the DOST-FNRI. So let me read po a few reminders for our webinar po. Okay. Let me share my screen lang po. Let me stop share po, sorry. Okay, so let me read reminders for us, okay? So, again po, this webinar po is equivalent po to 0.5 CPD units po yung binigay po sa atin ng PRC for this 1-hour free webinar po. So please provide your PRC ID number and PRC ID expiration date in your iTrain account. So you can edit your account at the upper left corner po of your iTrain window po. Okay? Please also edit your name in the account. Please note that the name you enter in the account will be reflected in your certificates. And also, please click the attendance sheet link provided in the Zoom chat box. So our colleagues here will put in our chat box po yung ating attendance sheet for today. So please answer for the attendance sheet. Okay. In accomplishing for the attendance sheet, let me remind everyone to please provide the email address you use in the creation of your IFNRI or iTrain account registration. So dapat po kung ano po yung email na in-input nyo po dun sa IFNRI, sa iTrain, yun din po yung email na i-input nyo po dito po sa ating attendance sheet. Okay? If you fail to provide the correct email address, the system will not be able to process your certificate because the system will not be able to read na kayo po yung nag-attend po dun sa ating webinar po. Okay? So, please log in to your iTrain account at 1 o'clock p.m. Okay, I repeat po, so 1 p.m. pa po, magla-log in to answer the post-test and feedback form. So, after this webinar, yung pinindot nyo po kanina na join webinar, magiging take evaluation button na po yun. So, you need to click po this profile the profile button and answer the post-test and feedback form. Okay, and then after answering the post-test and evaluation form, you can automatically download your certificate under the profile button. So, yung tick evaluation po, magiging get certificate na po yung button na yun. So, you can automatically download your certificate. Okay? So, yun po yung mga reminders natin. So, again po, please click po yung ating can we access the evaluation after 1 p.m.? No po. We encourage everyone po to, yes, after 1 p.m. we can accomplish po. But attendance sheet po, you can you need to accomplish po right now po yung attendance sheet po natin. Okay, so nasa chat box na po yung attendance. So you need na po kasi after po this webinar, I will download it and I will upload it to the system. So kapag hindi po kayo naka-sign, hindi po ma-recognize na nag-attend po kayo nitong webinar. Okay po? So, the ITING website po, just a side, ano lang po, no? The ITING website was published in 2018 to serve as a platform for the online and offline training services of DOST-FNRI. Since 2018, the Institute has been offering webinars through iTrain. Thus, we are very happy po that from that just 20 participants lang po usually yung uma-attend ng webinar namin pre-pandemic. And now, joining our webinar, we have about hundreds of participants na po who are joining the webinars po of FNRI. Okay? With the use of the ITING website, the enrollment and issuance of certificates for webinar participants is more easy. Okay? Now, we ask for your help to improve the ITING website. We will be posting a link po for the beta testing questionnaire in the Zoom chat box, and we will appreciate po to have your feedback po with regards to the website. So, makakatulong po ito sa amin para ma-improve po yung ating ITING website. So, may we ask po my colleagues po, si Ms. Jane and Ms. Kuling, to please put the beta testing questionnaire form po link po. So, we appreciate po your answers po dito. So, sana po ma-accomplish nyo po. Okay? Okay, we thank you for joining us in this webinar. We hope that you can also attend the next webinar, which is in August 27. So this will be on Friday po. Okay, so we started po with the webinar on Philippine dietary reference intake. Now we will go to the Pinggang Pinoy and Nutritional Guidelines for Filipinos. So our next webinar po will be on August 27, 2021. At the same time po, 10 o'clock to 11 a.m. via the ITING website also. So, kung paano po kayo nag-join sa webinar today, ganun din po yung process natin kung paano kayo mag-join sa webinar sa Friday po. So, you must log in to your IFNRI, go to ITING, go to profile button, and click the join webinar button. So, please make sure po to answer the retest. Okay po? So, again po, may remind po the attendance should be accomplished po now for us to upload it po sa ating ITING website para po ma-recognize na umattend po kayo ng ating webinar. And please answer po yung beta testing questionnaire po namin for the ITING website. Okay? So thank you very much po for joining us today. Sana po marami po kayong natutunan. So stay safe po and maraming salamat po sa pagsama sa atin. Thank you po.
Thank you, Card. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc Mil. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. Ingat lahat.
Kayo din po, ma'am.
Matatanda, mainam din sa bata.
Pinggang Pinoy,
Gulay at prutas, 1/2 ng plato.
Pinggang Pinoy,
Kanin o tinapay, 1/3 ng plato mo.
Pinggang Pinoy,
Isda o karne, 1/6 ng plato mo.
Pinggang